Hey, Sens fans, welcome to season 5, episode 9 of the Senstennial Podcast. And this week, we're really excited to welcome onto the show Ottawa Senators writer for The Athletic, Ian Mendes. So, Ian, welcome back and thanks for joining us this morning.
Yeah, listen, we started lining this up in Sweden, didn't we? This appearance on the pod. So I'm super excited to be with you guys here.
Yeah, and that's actually where we're going to kick things off because I know it's been a little while, but even though it's almost been about a month now that Ottawa's played their two matches in Stockholm, I really wanted to ask you about, your overall experience in Sweden, covering the Ottawa Senators there, meeting some Sens fans, and really how much you enjoyed the entire experience.
Yeah, first of all, hat tip to you for calling it matches in Europe. That's like your full European mode is coming out. They played two matches in Sweden. Yes.
Two
You know what?
fixtures.
Yeah.
Indubitably.
Like, and I was just telling you guys how just before we started recording, I was like, sometimes, and I don't want to come across as like that I'm like jaded or anything like that. Like, I don't want that to come across like that. But there is a monotony that sinks into covering a professional sports team after, like, for me, it's been 20-ish years. And so when you cover the same team, there's it just sometimes you need a break in the routine, I guess is what I'm saying. And this the 7 days in Stockholm that I spent, or whatever, 6 days I spent in Stockholm, unbelievable experience. And like for me, the best takeaway of all was the opportunity to meet with fans. Obviously, Matt, like you, like where it not only was at the that open practice day, right, which was super fun, where they had fans come in and you all of you had a chance to meet, or try to get a picture with Kachuk and Alfredson and Thomas Chabot. And like I just thought like that moment for me, walking into that room and seeing all those fans and seeing all of you get a chance to experience what we do all the time, which is just chat with Brady Kachuk or chat with Alfredson. It's a reminder of how privileged we are in our seat to be in the media. But it was just great how the excitement level, like I think when I went to Sweden in 2008, when Ottawa, again, this is how old I am. I covered this team when they went to Sweden in 2008. And maybe it was a function of where we were in social media at the time. Like, I think Twitter was just starting in a way, like Facebook was around, but the idea that we could all sort of I guess congregate or galvanize or create a meeting spot like we did in Stockholm, it wasn't there. So like I don't remember in 2008, I couldn't tell you if I ran into 5 Senators fans. I don't even remember, to be honest. But I'll always remember, all of us getting together in Stockholm, whatever. We had like 100 people that one night at the bar. It was awesome. Like, so that's my favorite thing that I look back, because, when you cover this sport for a long time, as I've been privileged to do, a lot of the stuff, it just becomes routine and it's monotonous. And like, I can't tell you what happened, 3 years ago. You remember that game where Buffalo came to town on a Tuesday night? I'll be like, I don't know, like maybe, but probably
It
not.
feels apt though. Buffalo does come to town on Tuesday nights. So
They always do. That Tuesday night in November. That's a classic
or,
visit
or
for the city.
February.
So anyway,
When we're
I
having a
loved it.
snowstorm.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that 20 years from now, I will absolutely remember the trip to Stockholm.
Yeah, and I think it was really well set up too. The company that Ottawa, organized it through, they kind of kept us in the dark on some of the stuff, or were a little vague. But then when it actually happened, it was a lot more than I think I expected. Like when we went to the actual like little fan festival in downtown Stockholm, like I thought we were just gonna go and explore and walk around like all the the free areas that anyone in the public can. But no, they actually had like the private facility, or sorry, the facility that the public could go into and do like VR hockey and air hockey and this, that, and the other thing. They actually like rented that out for a full hour and did like private events there, giveaways. Chris Phillips showed up. So I thought it was really well organized. And that was just one thing of a handful of things that they did that took me by surprise, but were a ton of fun. So I had a blast and I would love to do it again. But obviously, it's one of those things where as you mentioned, like, yes, the media privilege that you guys get to do that, but the people who went on that trip are also like, we're privileged to get to do something like that, because definitely not everyone has the means to go out and do a trip like that. So, and yeah, like, so love you, man. But but yeah, so I just thought it was like a really cool experience, and I really hope that more Sens fans get to experience it the next time they go and do an overseas trip somewhere.
I think one of the really cool things that they really took advantage of too is like the content that they created. Like Philly on the Street in
Yeah.
Sweden was hilarious. And I had my partner's dad like sending me like, this is so funny. Like and then Matt, you were in some of the videos. So like,
Yeah.
Mr. Big Time over here. Liz like won a Sens jersey
Yeah.
as a Habs fan.
That
So
was a painful moment. We were neck and neck for the first overall in the Sens trivia, and there was
yeah.
just some random one. It was like, what is the overall distance that the Sens have skated in like the past 2 seasons or something weird like that, like, or in like one season, but it was like 5 years ago or something. I was like,
Oh
I
boy.
don't know. And she's like, yeah, I just picked the largest answer. And that was the difference maker.
Yeah,
And that's
I
why
guess
she won the
that's
jerseys.
smart. I
Yeah.
think everything about Sweden's really cool. And the last time Ottawa went to Sweden, everybody was talking about it this time. Like everybody was saying, okay, we need to be aware of Sweden. We need to know what happens after Sweden. And they won both their matches. And they ended up losing 7 straight last time. And this time around, they've won 2 of 6. But do you believe that they're better than their record has indicated?
Man, so they're 2 and, oh yeah, that's right, because they lost to the Islanders, Panthers, Jackets, and Leafs, right?
Yeah.
And since they came back, yeah, you're right. You know what? It's that Jackets game that I think we all like to forget.
Doesn't
the
make
Jackets
sense.
game. So, like, so yeah, it is different. Like, I remember when they came back. You know what's funny? When they did the original trip the trip in 2017 to Sweden. If you recall, that was when they just traded for Matt Duchene.
Yeah.
Remember, Duchene's first 2 games were in
against
Sweden,
Colorado too.
against his old team, right? So it was kind of weird. And if you remember at the time, this is how long ago it was. At the time, the Avalanche were one of the worst teams in the league.
Yeah.
And Ottawa had just gone to the conference final in the spring of 2017, added Duchene. They were kind of like, we're in our window. Yeah. They go to Stockholm, and they beat the Avalanche twice, but they beat them by 1 goal each time.
Yeah.
I think it was back-to-back 4-3 wins or whatever it was, okay? So I'm working on the drive on TSN 1200.
Yeah.
And I come back on the Monday, and I'm like, yeah, I didn't love the way they played in Sweden. Like if you're asking me if I feel like super convinced that now they've got Duchene and they're like a Stanley Cup contender, I was like, I'm pumping the brakes. I'm not convinced. And I'm sitting in the 1200 studio, and the phone line lights up.
Yeah.
And our producer, I think that day, was Steve Bunda, who I love, Steve. And Steve Bunda is like, he says to me, you got to take this call. And I'm like, we don't usually just take phone calls from randos in the middle. Like, usually we would call, we're like, hey, you want something? Give us a call, 750-1200, whatever. Okay. And he types into the computer screen, Pierre from Orleans. And I'm like, is it that Pierre from Orleans? He's like, yep. So I'm like, let's go to the phone line. It's Pierre from Orleans. And it's Pierre Dorion. And he was listening to us. He was in the Costco parking lot. And he phones up and says, I was listening to what you said, and I couldn't disagree more with what you said. And he comes at me, and it was fine, right? Like, I mean, this is gold radio. Like, when else would you get a general manager phoning you from Costco? Like, it doesn't happen.
That's very Ottawa.
We have Pierre from Costco.
Yeah. And I wish, I can't remember if I asked him if he bought, like, no, it was the one in Orleans. It wasn't the, because I was thinking in my mind, I was like, did this guy go to Gatineau to buy 64 Coors Light? Like, that's what I was wondering. But
he goes and buys an Octagon.
Yeah, the Octagon of Coors Light. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, I was really shocked. Like, you're kind of thrown off. So we have this sort of back and forth, and I think, Simmer was with me at the time, and we have this back and forth amongst the three of us where he's like, I couldn't disagree with you more.
Wow.
And I always felt like I wanted to have him back on like 3 weeks later for and then what happened segment. But I don't, that was a long way for me to get to this point, which is I don't feel like I did. Like in 2017, I'm like, something's wrong here. They're not quite. I will say that I've liked the way, I don't buy when they say that we played really well against Columbus. I don't buy it. Like, I love their start in that game. I thought they looked so organized and confident in the first like 12 minutes of the Columbus game. I'm like, okay, here we go. But when you give up 4 unanswered goals in a game and you've lost a couple in a row leading into it, and you've talked about how you're going to be better and you're going to be more detail oriented, you don't get to say that we played a good game.
Yeah.
Or you can say it, but we don't have to buy what you're selling. And I didn't buy it. I didn't buy it 1 minute. But, they turned around after that. And the Seattle game, full credit to Forsberg, thought he was really good.
Yeah.
I love their game against the Rangers. Like, I got no problem with it.
Exceptional. Yeah.
Exceptional game. And I really like their game against Toronto. I can't sit here and tell you that I didn't like. So I'll give them credit. I think it's 3 good games in a row, not necessarily 4. I think they deserve the better fate against Toronto. A couple of the mistakes were sloppy that ended up in the back of their net. Like Hamonic losing his stick and kind of a turnover at the other line. That's not good. I thought Ridley Gregg, it was a poorly timed line change where he didn't get it in deep on I think it was the Nylander goal. So it's those little things that still come back to bite them, right?
It's interesting because when they defensive breakdown really hard. And they in the last 3 games, and which is great. Like, they've played 3 good games. If they play a 4th good game, that would actually be a record for them this season. But the defensive breakdowns have been happening less in the last 3 games. But when they do happen, and the Leafs game is a perfect example, when they do happen, it ends up in our net. And that just cannot continue to happen.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, and then the other part of the equation is the goaltending. So on the nights where Korpisalo and Forsberg have been like dynamite, they win.
Yeah.
On the nights where they're like kind of just mid or like pedestrian or average or below average, they're losing because you add those two things together.
Yeah.
It's a bad recipe. Like, that's the thing. Like, teams like the Rangers, I want to make this clear. Every team in the league has defensive breakdowns. Every one of them.
Yeah.
They don't always end up in the back of your net because in New York, this year, Jonathan Quick's been dynamite. Shesterkin, outside of the Ottawa game, he's Shesterkin, right? Like, so they bail you out. And in the Seattle game, and to some extent the Rangers game, Anton Forsberg bailed them out. So we're not talking about, I can't believe, because the turnover, you don't remember the turnover because Forsberg bailed them out. You don't think about it.
Exactly.
And in the Toronto game, if Wall doesn't, Tarasenko, he just, 2 times in that game was
same spot.
Same spot. And then in my mind, I'm like, man, if he one times those in, they're in the back of the net. It's not even. But the only thing I thought
back to Timmy,
or give it back. The only thing I thought on Tarasenko, and I don't know if this thought crossed both of your minds, I was like, thank God he scored against the Rangers.
Yes, yeah, I did think.
Can you imagine if Vladdy Tarasenko had gone 14 consecutive games without scoring, and then those 2 glove saves from Wall, we'd be like, this guy's snake bitten. So thank God he scored.
Yeah.
It reminded me of like a classic DeBrincat game, to be honest with you. It seemed like last year there were so many of those games where he was just getting robbed left, right, and center. And Yeah, I don't know. Sadly I was near several Leafs fans at the game, and there were a couple more belligerent ones, and I got heckled a few times for taking a picture after Josh Norris scores and he's going and giving fist bumps to the bench, and jeered for God, I don't know what. But anyway, at the end of the day, they played a good game. It's just too bad they lost, especially when it's at home in front of 80% Leafs fans. Would have been nice to see them come out with a win, especially with how the momentum was going in the dying minutes. But that's kind of the luck of the draw sometimes. But I wanted to go back. You were talking about, defense, and we were talking about the defensive structure. So Ottawa recently brought in his former head coach, Jacques Martin, as a senior advisor to the coaching staff. He was obviously known for his team's defensive prowess when he was here, but also his team, as you wrote about actually in a recent article, they were pretty good offensively too. But
Yeah.
I was kind of wondering, how much influence you think he'll have on the team, despite him not actually being on the bench.
Yeah, it's a really good question, right? Like, and I think what this does in bringing in Jacques Martin, I think to some extent it should, I don't know what the word is, satisfy or kind of calm. Look, there's a portion of the fan base that believes they're not going to win with this head coach and this current coaching staff. And I don't want to say that it's 5% of the fans or a small percentage. I don't believe in trying to paint like a number. All I know is that there's a lot of people that are really disappointed with the way the season's going. And that's fair. But you bring in and I think for the people that complain about the way the team is playing, your number one beef seems to be that they're sloppy and disorganized at times, right? Like that feels like like if everyone could say, like, I could fix one thing about the team, you would say we just don't seem to have structure, or we, like, you know what I mean? So now you're bringing in the guy
King of structure.
He, like, if you had to say, like, what's the one hallmark of Jacques Martin? It's structure. It's or like calmness, and like you want that to be sort of injected throughout the team. Now, the question is, of course, when you're not on the ice for practice, when you're not behind the bench for a game, like, how much influence can you really have? So it's a great question. I'm curious to see how the dynamic of this works. Like, I think like Jacques, and I've known him for 20-ish years, whatever. And I have so much respect for this guy because he's just exactly what, as I said, the type of guy that will just bring calmness and stability. But I think DJ said on, gosh, now I can't, it must, yeah, no, it would have been the Leafs game. He said, he was very quiet to start. And I think that's what's going to be, like, Jacques isn't, like, his personality isn't such that when he walks into a room, he kind of takes over the room. Like that, his personality is just, he's very mild-mannered. He's very, like, so I think that's the way he's going to approach this. I don't think he's going to come in and start, like, saying, you got to fix this, got to be, like, I think it's going to be very calm. But I think what they're hoping is that the calmness sort of permeates through the coaching staff and then down to the players, that there's been a lot of, chaos or whatever you want, adjective you want to use. So I think it'll be fair to look at, like, after, let's revisit this after they play the Penguins on the 23rd and they kind of have a little bit of a break. Like, are we seeing a little bit more, excuse me, calmness? Are we seeing a little bit more, like, I think Jacques, he's trying to take a big picture view of this to start, and then he'll work in on it. But I think it's a good thing to sort of, at least, like, at the very least, what you've done, I think, if you're Steve Staios and Mike Andlauer, you've now said, okay, we understand that there's something that needs to be fixed with the coaching staff. They're not just saying, hey, we're putting a blindfold on, we're putting our fingers in our ears, we don't want to hear from you. I don't think that's their approach. I think their approach is they understand that there's some tweaks that need to be made. So to me, it's the perfect compromise. It's you're bringing in somebody who's known for structure and calmness and defensive ability, and you're bringing them in without blowing up the entire staff. So, but I want to see where this leads in 10 or 15 games.
I think you look at the hire, and everybody I've talked to has been excited about it because of his his past and what he's been able to accomplish. And I think a lot of that, like, people looked at his time in Pittsburgh and they won a cup without Chris Letang when he was injured. And doing that as the defensive coach without Chris Letang in his prime is an accomplishment in and of itself. So if you're able to bring, a modicum of structure to this team, and I think it would do wonders for a guy like Jacob Chikrin, who I've found has struggled under this type of system. But you look at his time in Arizona, Arizona, getting those desert dogs figured out. He was excellent. He was an excellent defenseman all around. But I found his time in Ottawa, he struggled, but I think he will do really well with a guy like Jacques Martin saying to DJ, or through DJ, this is what we should be doing, and kind of instilling a little more X's and O's in the system, so to speak.
Yeah, it's a good point on Pittsburgh, right? Because they like Ron Hainsey was like a main guy, right? From one of their cups, and like you look at some of the players, like I think Trevor Daley was a regular one year. It wasn't like you said, it wasn't like I can't remember. Was that was the second cup they won, right? Was without Letang in 17. It's remarkable that's what he was able to do. And you're right, I don't think. But again, I leave room to be wrong here.
Yeah.
I don't think this is a talent issue anymore on the Ottawa roster when healthy. Healthy. Now, I think their plan was, obviously, we're going to get Chabot, Zub, Sanderson, Chikrin. Those guys are going to eat up like 46 to 50 minutes a night. We're going to be in a good spot. And they haven't had that, right?
Yeah.
They haven't had those four guys in the lineup for more than, I think, 6 or 7 games total, because Zub was out for a bit. Chabot's been out for a good chunk of the year. But back to your original point, okay, yeah, great. But Pittsburgh won a cup without Letang. So let's stop saying you can't win if Chabot's not there, or you can't win because, injuries happen to a lot of teams. That's when it's exactly when you need to rely on your structure, is when you have injuries.
Exactly. And I think also, I just want to shout out Brandstrom for the past 2 games, because he has been exceptional lately with playing with Zub. And that has been a bright, shining light in the darkness that is this team without Thomas Chabot.
You know what I love Brandstrom was the end of the Seattle game, where he blocked. Remember, it was a Seattle game, right? Where he was like laying down, he was blocking shots.
Yes, it was.
Right?
Yeah,
it was a Seattle game, not because it was like 2-0. Yeah, and it's like he's, for his relative to his size.
Yeah,
I find him very he's physically engaged, and you obviously wish, in some ways, you wish he was bigger, because it would be easier for him to box out guys or whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know. I'm a big believer in that guy.
Me too.
I like,
this podcast loves Eric Brandstrom.
I believe in that guy. I really do.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting period, because I really believe that Jacques Martin can bring the structure, and the guys that they have will really thrive. And, to the point of Jacques Martin, we've seen Andlauer and Staios bring in a number of Sens alumni, former coaching staff, former front office members, former team members. Do you believe that, aside from trying to improve their organization, they're also kind of trying to appease Sens fans a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, another good example of that would be, I know it was a one-off, but bringing Lyndon Sludge back for one game.
Yeah.
I think if you're going to criticize the old regime, one of the biggest kind of complaints you would have if you were an Ottawa fan was you severed ties with a lot of people that meant something to you as a Senators fan. And it might be as minor as a Lyndon Sluage, but it might be as major as a Daniel Alfredson. And there was a lot of guys in between. Kyle Turris, Mark Borowiecki, Cyril Leader. Like go through the list. And there was a disconnect there. And when you're not playing well on the ice, and they weren't playing well on the ice from like 2017, 18, whatever, right through, you could argue, even into now, but certainly there was a 3 or 4 year window where they just weren't doing well on the ice. When you can't rely on the nostalgia factor and you can't lean on, hey, remember when back in the day, because those guys don't want to come back and they don't want to put on a Sens jersey. It's a tough road to navigate. And so one of the things that I think Andlauer really understands, and this comes from his fandom with the Montreal. Look, he grew up a huge Montreal Canadiens fan. Like, I mean, diehard. Like I think I'd be curious to sit down with him and do like Habs trivia with him, because like he's like next level. Like
that's
he's not
literally
just like
your next Athletic article. Like you gotta do it now.
I gotta sit down with him for that. But like he legitimately knows. So he understands, I think, very keenly the place of history with a franchise. So I think when you're a Montreal fan, you go into that arena and you look up and you see the number 4 of Beliveau, and you see, all the 9 for Richard and 10 for Lafleur, and it means something. And when those alumni come back, those that are still with us and still alive, and they walk into the arena, there's just this feeling of magic that kind of fills the arena. And so I understand, and I think Mike Andlauer understands, Ottawa's history isn't as deep and as rich and as storied as Montreal. All of us get that, okay? But damn, we've had a fun ride, and we need to celebrate that. We need to celebrate Alfredson and Spezza and Redden and like all of it. It's all great. And so when you don't have that ability to reach back into the past because you've burned those bridges, boy, it's really smart of the organization from a PR standpoint. Let's go fix some things. And it just, to me, it all started with Cyril Leader, because you bring that guy back in and now you're going to restore, because Alfredson, he's not going to come back unless there's some of these familiar faces or people he can trust kind of in the organization.
Now, I have one more bigger burning question for you before we maybe try to get a fun one, sneak a fun one in there. But so we've seen this locker room vocally defend their coach several times. You've seen them criticize fan reactions or the fire DJ chants. It obviously seems like they're under a lot of pressure. And, do you feel that the vibe may be not as positive as it was in the past? And do you think maybe that Staios could potentially look to make some sort of small trade or transaction just to try and alleviate some of the pressure that the roster is feeling?
Boy, it's a good question, right? Like my question is, what do you like now? You're not going to have Shabbat for all of December, and I don't know. Is that a pressure point where they feel like, okay, let's just go out and add a defenseman? I don't know. I still think if they try and look at this and say, at some point we're going to get Shabbat back, and at some point we're going to get Pinto back, do you really need to do anything else? Like I think Ridley Gregg's a full-time NHLer now. I really do. Yeah. And I'm very mindful of, he's come back from a high ankle sprain, and so we got to give him a little bit more runway, but he's ready to go now. He's not let's put him back in the minors. Yeah. So I think I'd like to see their lineup with Norris, Tim, Pinto, Ridley Gregg, whatever, like all of these guys in there.
Yeah.
And the top 4 that we talked about on D, like I'd like to see that. So I don't know that they need to make a trade per se, but like about the vibes being different, I think that's a function, and maybe this is going to sound weird, but I think it's a good thing, because I think it shows that there are some expectations on this team now. Like I don't think Brady Tkachuk gets snippy or Claude Giroux gets kind of a little aggressive or whatever, if they weren't feeling some heat, and that's okay. You should feel some heat. Like you should feel some degree of pressure to get it done. And like I'm never a fan of taking shots at the people who pay money or support. Like Ottawa fans have spent a lot of either financially they've invested in this team, or even like to me the bigger investment is emotional investment. Like I can't say that enough. When you come home from your job and you've worked all day and you get home and it's 6 o'clock and you're like, all right, 7 o'clock game, I got something to look forward to, and I'm gonna emotionally invest 2.5 to 3 hours into something because my job isn't fun or whatever, like whatever else is going on in your life, that's your escape. And when your escape becomes frustrating, man, like I can't tell you how much I empathize with Ottawa fans, because you, like, the one thing I will defend Ottawa fans to the ends of the earth on this. The patience has been there. So, like, I don't like it when people say, like, oh, this fan base, like, settle down. No, you've been uber patient with this program. Like, you have been.
Nice
like,
reference there.
Yeah, I know. You like that? That's harkening back to 2018 with the Uber reference. But like, to me, if you went back to when they first kind of started to plant the seeds of the rebuild in January, February of 2018, remember that's when they shipped out like Phaneuf and Derek Brassard, and like it became very obvious that they were, tearing it down. If we all took a trip in a DeLorean, or we went back in time to 2018, and I said to you, we're going to get to December of 2023. This team will not have made the playoffs yet, and they're not going to be a lock to make the playoffs. You'd be like, what the hell has gone wrong?
Now, what happened?
And I'm willing to forgive the hyperbole of the unparalleled success from 2021 to 2020. All of that was all bluster. Okay, whatever. But the core of that message was, this was the window to compete. And we're in 2023. And they haven't even made the playoffs, and they're not even a lock to make the playoffs. Like, damn straight you should be asking questions, and you don't get to tell Ottawa fans, like, listen, are there some fans who believe in the program and believe in, absolutely. And I'm not telling them how to act and behave and say, like, you should, whatever. Like, I guess my point is, stop telling fans how to act. If you want to be angry, you have every right to be angry. If you want to be optimistic, you have every right to be optimistic. But that's what happens when you miss the playoffs in 6 years. The range of emotions can become very wide. And I think Ottawa fans have every right to be angry and frustrated. But I also think that bleeds down into the locker room. And that's kind of go back to your original question, that I do think that there's a level of frustration that is kind of there now that wasn't there a year ago, 2 years ago, whatever. Like, and I think that's a good thing, because it shows that there's some expectations on this team.
Totally.
I think it really is a frustrating existence being a Sens fan, because you're hearkened to like, just be patient, and you're going through a rebuild, and it just hasn't come. And now with new ownership, new players, a lot of stuff, we have high expectations. And I'm sorry that you're finally, as a player, you're finally starting to feel those expectations from a fan base that is tired of being patient.
No, absolutely. Exactly. That's just it. Like, this fan base has been so patient for the last 5 years, 6 years.
Well, on that note, thank you so much for your time this morning, Ian. Really appreciate you coming on here and joining us and just chatting about all the stuff that's happened over the last month. So is there any article coming out in the near future that we should be looking out for?
Ooh, now you're putting pressure on me. I better have something good. No, I got a couple of features that I'm working on that I think that people will enjoy coming up here in the month of in the month of December. But nothing that I feel like, okay, I look for this coming up. But thanks so much for having me, guys. This
Yeah,
was
no
great,
problem.
Matt. It was great to hang with you in Sweden, and I'd love to come back at some point whenever you guys need me. You guys obviously have my contact info. Hit me up because I love chatting with you guys.
Will do.
Awesome.
Thanks so much,
Thanks,
Ian.
Ian.
All right, have a good one, guys.
Peace.
You too.